Now we'll be reviewing Bylaw 17, Playing and Practice Seasons. This bylaw will give you the limits of practices and games for each sport, as well as your out-of-season regulations. An institution's playing season is made up of a traditional segment and a non-traditional segment. Each sport has a specific number of weeks in which to conduct the season. When you declare your weeks, that means you're setting the layout of your entire season, both the traditional and the non-traditional segments. If you practice or compete during any part of a week, it's going to be counted as a full week. A great tool in Bylaw 17 is right at the end. It's Figure 17-1, and it provides a clear picture of a playing season regulations for each sport. This section tells you when you can start to practice, the first permissible date of competition, the maximum number of contests your team can compete in, when the season ends, as well as any exemptions for that sport. The other thing in Bylaw 17 is athletically related activities. There's a lengthy list in Bylaw 17.02.1.1 that explains which activities you can only do during the season. That means these activities can only occur during those declared weeks in the traditional or non-traditional segments. If the team isn't in season, as a coach, you aren't allowed to engage in any of these activities with your student athletes. Right below that, in Bylaw 17.02.1.1.1, there's a list of exceptions. Things on this list are exceptions to the athletically related activities rule so that they can occur at any time. There are also general regulations that apply to all sports. There are a couple of important rules to remember here. First, your team has to take 1 day off per week. The other thing is that in general, there are no daily or weekly hour limitations in Division III. You may have seen limits like this if you've ever worked at a Division I or II school before, but we don't have these. However, keep in mind that we do have a rule that says your student athletes can't miss class time for practice activities. Another issue you should keep in mind is medical exams. Before you can participate in any athletic activity, your student athletes have to have gotten a medical exam or evaluation. They can get the exam while they are still at home, but it must be administered by a physician within 6 months prior to whenever the student athlete first starts to compete or practice. This applies to all individuals who participate in practice. Once they've had that exam, in the following years, all they have to do is have their medical history updated, and again, that's within 6 months immediately before any participation. In addition to medical exams, you will also have to confirm the sickle cell trait status of your student athletes before they can participate in athletics. All first-year and transfer students must be confirmed. Student athletes who provide documented results of a prior test or who sign a written release declining to be tested do not need to undergo testing. All student athletes are required to participate in educational programming on the subject, but those who sign a release or want to practice while their test results are pending have to receive additional education. Last, remember that testing positive for a sickle cell trait doesn't affect your student athlete's eligibility. Now, let's review the rules related to the non-traditional date of competition. Examples would be your fall ball contest for baseball, or perhaps a spring soccer game. On your one date of competition, if your institution chooses to use one, you are limited to the maximum of 8 hours of athletically related activity that can occur on that date. Any athletically related activities you do are going to count against the 8-hour limit. So that means that on-field practice, film review, chalk talk, basically anything that shows up in that list in 17.02.1.1 will count against the 8 hours. In addition, activity at all levels has to be counted towards the limit. That means all of the time for your varsity, JV, and freshman teams has to be 8 hours or less when it's added together. Within those 8 hours, there are then additional sport-specific limits, so you'll need to check Bylaw 17 for the limits in your specific sport. Institutions are also allowed to play one alumni contest during the non-traditional segment in addition to the one date of competition. As you can tell, Bylaw 17 is very sport-specific, so make sure to look at the rules for your sport to see what's permissible. Don't rely on what other coaches in your department are doing. Any questions you may have should be directed to your AD or the person who handles compliance at your school.